Okay, looks like we are live on Standing for Truth. I want to welcome everybody for being here. My name is Donny, and I am your host and moderator for tonight's much anticipated debate between Dr. Kent, the science gent, and Grayson on evolution. Tonight, evolution is on trial. Now, being December 29th and the end of the year, this is actually our last debate in the prolific 2022 Evolution Debate Challenge series, which will, of course, continue into 2023. We have done about 50 of these so far just this year alone, and I got to say, it's been a ton of fun. So, Grayson, Kent, thank you both for giving us your time for this important debate. And Grayson, why don't we start with you? It's good to have you back. It's a privilege to be hosting this debate between you two. Why don't we take 30 seconds or so just to kind of break the ice, get to know the both of you a little bit. Grayson, I understand you have a new channel as well. And so why don't you just tell us in the audience a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your channel?
Yeah, so since our last debate, I started my own YouTube channel, Based Theory. So hopefully there will be a link to that in the description or down below. And then basically on that channel, I'm going to be hosting after shows for like after some of these debates. If people in the comments want to continue the evolution and creation debate, anyone is welcome. I really love debating pseudoscience and creationism. So I'm open for any of that. I will be there after tonight's debate. And I'm also going to be trying to upload videos of debunking other kinds of pseudoscience as well, like climate change denial, flat earth, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, stay tuned. Hopefully subscribe if you're interested in that kind of content. A little bit more about me. I am, I think, one of the only atheists that Kent has debated where he has not invited them to Dinosaur Adventureland. So I will admit my feelings were a little bit hurt, but, I'm trying to push through it.
Well, I appreciate that, Grayson. Maybe we will get an official invite to Dinosaur Adventureland tonight. So, Kent, good to have you back, brother. How you doing today? A little bit about yourself, a little bit about Dal.
Well, thank you for having me on again, brother. And Grayson, I apologize. You are invited. Anybody can come here to Dinosaur Adventureland. So come on down. We'll put you up, feed you. If you stay more than 2 days, we'll give you a hammer, put you to work. Kind of the way it works around here. It's me. My name's Kent Hovind. I've been a Baptist preacher 48 years, but I taught high school science and math for 15 years. And I believe the Bible is literally true and scientifically accurate. And the pseudoscience is evolution. There's nothing scientific about it. Nobody's ever seen a dog produce a non-dog or a cow produce a non-cow. It just doesn't happen. It's imagination. SpongeBob style. Just imagine. We're all related to an amoeba. It's pure. It's dumb. It's real dumb. It's one of the dumbest and most dangerous religions in the world. And I'm glad Grayson's going to try to debunk pseudoscience because he's going to have to come around to my side. Go ahead.
Okay, Kent, I appreciate the intros from the both of you. I can already tell this will be a debate to remember. For the audience sake, let me go over the format a little bit. It's going to be informal. It's going to be more free-flowing and organic, this debate. I'm looking forward to it. So basically, Grayson has a somewhat of a pre-prepared opening statement going over all of his arguments and points for tonight. But we're going to take it one point at a time. It's going to be Grayson. He will, as he's making his arguments, as Kent feels, if he feels necessary to interrupt, we can kind of go back and forth on those specific points. That's what we're going to do. So we're going to keep it, again, more free-flowing and organic, but we will still be having an audience Q&A. So please, if you have a question, the topic being evolution on trial, make sure you're tagging me at Standing for Truth or at Donny, and that way I won't miss it. So with that, Grayson, we are going to give you the floor to kick us off in terms of this debate. So Grayson, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So like Donny was saying, for this debate, I've kind of opened myself up for Kent to interrupt me whenever I've made a point that he wants to address. Hopefully, I do not come to regret that decision. And this can go smoothly. So without much ado, I'll just kind of get started and sort of outline the direction that I want to take tonight's discussion. So for those of you who missed my last debate with Kent, we mainly focus on kinds, what defines them, what separates them, and I tried to explain to Kent something that scientists call the law of monophily. But for tonight's debate, however, I want to only briefly touch on evolution and some of the points from our previous debate before moving on to discuss the main topic of the fossil record and the age of the Earth. As apart from evolution and genetics, which we focused on last time, those are two topics that Kent loves to misrepresent. So without ado, I'll just get into the first point, bringing up a point from the last debate when I explained how mammals would be considered as a kind under Kent's definition of being able to bring forth after their kind. So in response to this, he said that mammals was just a word that we humans use to categorize these animals with, and that the animals don't care. But Kent, there's a very specific reason why mammals and eukaryotes and primates, etc., are all grouped together, even apart from their shared morphological characteristics. It's their DNA. So every single mammal species is more closely genetically related to all the other mammal species than they are to any species outside of the mammal branch. So the DNA is very clearly explaining.
Okay, let's stop.
Categorizations are not just arbitrary names that we assign.
Okay, let's stop right there. Appreciate it. Go ahead, Kent. You guys can have a little back and forth. Kent, have an uninterrupted.
Yeah, you already said something that's terribly false. Just because they have similar DNA does not mean they're related. You chose to make them related. They don't think they're related. The cow doesn't think he's related to the bird at all. So, but to say they're related is incorrect, okay? Man has decided that the DNA code, if they look similar, we think they're related. I'm surrounded by probably 4,000 books in my library here, and they probably all have the same 26 letters of the alphabet. I'd bet all of them do. So what does that mean? That's the language which you write English, okay? So the fact that they have similar DNA code does not mean they're related. In your mind, I know you've been taught they are, but no, it shows no relationship between the elephant and the cow and the bird just because they have similar DNA code. So I completely object to that first statement. You are incorrect. You may believe that if you'd like, but that is a religious statement you just made, not scientific.
Okay, so apart from the fact that like DNA does demonstrate relationship, I'm fine with just changing the word choice. And I'll just say that every mammal species has more similar DNA to all the other mammal species than they do to any non-mammal species. So I won't use the word related. I'll just say that the DNA sequence is more similar to, and that still explains why these are not just, arbitrarily assigned names. There's actually DNA similarities that make these kinds of categorizations. But I don't want to get too bogged down on something like that. I mean, if I can, I'll move on to another topic that's similar. It's speaking of DNA. It's from the last debate, and then we'll get to the main fossil record kind of arguments. If you're okay
I
with
guess
that.
what we could do, I did see Kent. I saw you put your finger up. So if there's something you wanted to respond to, feel free to do so. And then Grayson, we can allow you to move on to the next point.
Yeah, he's already stuck in the box that because there are similarities, there's a historical relationship where one descended from the other, etc. If there were not similarities between the different animals and similar proteins, etc., we could only eat each other. But the fact that the brown cow can eat the green grass and give the white milk and churn it and get yellow butter, and I eat it and get blonde hair, that's proof of a designer. But you're looking at those similarities as proof of relationship. And it's no such thing. I'd look at the same evidence, see the same thing, and say, wow, that's pretty cool the way that's designed. General Motors makes all kinds of different vehicles. And I'd be willing to bet thousands of the parts are interchangeable. I bet the lug nuts on a Chevy pickup truck will work on a Chevy car. So what does that prove? In your mind, it proves relationship. In my mind, it proves common designer. So we're already strike one. Okay, I don't think that's evidence, but I think you've been taught that for so long, you're probably stuck in that rut. I'll help you out. Yes, there are similarities. Does not mean anything as far as relationship. Nothing. Go ahead.
Okay, so this point actually segues perfectly to the next point that I was going to make, which was that in our last debate, I specifically brought up this notion of DNA similarities proving either common design or common ancestry. So just to briefly touch on the metaphor with the car parts and the books, I feel like this breaks down, as for reasons I touched in the last debate, that cars and books don't have any relationships of any kind. There's no father or mother book or car. There's no relationship at all between these things. The only things that actually can have familial relationships are living things with DNA. But the point I wanted to bring up about the common design versus common ancestry is that, and I don't think that Kent addressed this in our previous debate, that's why I wanted to bring it up now, is that when we use the common design hypothesis to make predictions about DNA similarities, right? Because if your explanation for DNA similarities is common design, then we should be able to use common design to make predictions about DNA similarities. So, but when we do this, these predictions fail. So my example for this, and in that evolution does make successful predictions of DNA similarities, would be Kent. There's a question for you. So based on your creation model, should we expect a goldfish's DNA to be more similar to a shark's or to a human's? And why? Like, what's your reasoning for why common design would be able to allow you to make that prediction?
I wouldn't make any prediction in that at all. I don't think that's a silly way to even take the argument. All we've ever observed is sharks produce baby sharks, goldfish produce baby goldfish, humans produce baby humans. You talk about ancestry, that's ancestry. We've seen the ancestry of bacteria for thousands of generations, and they never produce anything but a bacteria, never. We've seen the ancestry of dogs for probably thousands of generations, and they always make dogs. So all scientific evidence from ancestry says dogs produce dogs and nothing else ever. Now, if you wish to imagine, SpongeBob style, that if you went back billions of years, it was something else, that's outside of science. I wish you could see that. So I would not make any prediction about the DNA of goldfish or sharks. I don't care. The sharks are different than goldfish in hundreds of ways, but it doesn't matter how similar the DNA is. I can pick two books off my shelf and probably find whole sentences that are nearly identical by totally different authors. That's just the way we speak in English. It's got nothing to do with ancestry. Observable science for ancestry says dogs produce dogs, never an exception, never.
So do you understand my logic about saying that if you're going to use common design as an explanation to explain why certain species have genetic similarities between each other, and if your answer for that is common design between them, then logically we should be able to use common design to predict which species should have more genetic similarities than other species. Does that make sense logically to you?
I understand what you're saying. I disagree completely. I don't think it shows any prediction at all. I think some great inventors of the past have produced some wildly different inventions. Galileo produced some amazing things, and different people have make one invention, then they get a wild idea in a totally different area and make another. It's the same guy designing them, but they're vastly different. I think God designed creatures just to make us say, wow, you're really smart, God. But in your mind, you think because there are similarities, therefore, there's a relationship, and that's where there is just no such thing. There are similarities between a dog and a grizzly bear. They both have hair on the outside. They both have a nose on the front. They both have feet. So what? And see, in your mind, you've been taught to believe that's proof years ago they had a common ancestor. I think they have feet because they need to walk, and they have a nose on the front because they need to smell, and they have hair because they need to stay warm. It's a great design. And there are thousands of differences, but it wouldn't matter. Comparing similarities of the physical features or the habits or the DNA structure is a completely meaningless rabbit trail to go down. All we've observed is dogs produce dogs. That's all.
Don't worry. We're going to get to dogs and bears later on. Okay. So just hold on to that idea.
I'm not worried at all.
So my main point was just that if we look at a goldfish and a shark, we can very clearly see that they are more common in design than a goldfish is to a human. But evolution would predict that because humans evolved from the group of fishes that had bones, and that sharks branched off from fishes before the evolution of bones, then the evolution prediction would be that fish and humans share a common ancestor later on than goldfish and sharks, and thus human DNA should be more similar to a goldfish than a goldfish is similar to a shark. And when we actually check to see which DNA is more similar to the other one, we find the evolution prediction vindicated. So that was my point with that.
You don't find it vindicated. You find that because you imagine they have a common ancestor at all, this is one bit of evidence that you think supports that theory. But observation says goldfish only produce goldfish. You know, any exceptions, has anybody ever seen a goldfish turn to a human? Because you're claiming because we have bones, goldfish and humans are related. That's ridiculous. Goldfish only make baby goldfish. No exceptions. So that is imagination. You left science about halfway through your description. It's true. We might have more similarities because of the way somebody counted them. I mean, there's how many billions of DNA lines of code? You can count them in all cards. How many lines of code have to go wrong to make your computer stop working?
So you see how I can just use your argument against you on that when you say like that they're all, no matter how many varieties that like the goldfish can differentiate into, it's always still just a goldfish. But your argument is also that these are just arbitrary names that we give to the animals and that the animals don't really care. So I can point to the fact that every single generation of goldfish is slightly different than their parents. And every generation, those differences continue to add up to where, you know, if a goldfish that's separated from another by 100 generations is going to be much more different than a goldfish by one generation, and a goldfish 1,000 generations apart is going to be even more different. And you can't just say, but they're all still goldfish, because that's just in your own arguments. Those are just arbitrary names that we give them that they don't really care about.
Okay. First of all, I agree that each generation may have slight differences. I disagree that you say these differences add up. They do not. Nobody's ever seen that. They've created differences in dogs where they decided to select a certain trait, like, you know, small and stupid, so you get a pug like my wife's dog, or large, and, you know, you can get a variety of dogs. But they don't accumulate like you imagine. Changes happen, and then there's just as likely to change right back in the next generation. It's not like it made a change and kept getting improvements. They're not adding up. They're changing within limits. They've been trying to get bigger dogs for a long time. They now have as big as the Mastiff. They're 3'8", I think, is the biggest. Well, why don't they get a dog as big as a giraffe? There are animals as big as a giraffe, you know, like a giraffe. So they've been trying for bigger dogs. Who knows why, but they don't add up. You can't just keep adding them up. Somebody taught you that. You need to get your money back for that part of your education. I disagree. They don't add up. I agree there's changes. The changes have limits. There are 400 varieties of cows.
We can observe, test, and demonstrate that these changes add up. All we would need to do is compare the DNA over generations. So we can, you know, we can compare the DNA at generation 1, and then generation 2, and then generation 100, and generation 1,000, and we can see that the differences between generation 1 and generation 2 are much smaller than the differences between generation 1 and 100 or 1 and 1,000. Like, we can actually see this empirically and measure it. We just have to look at the DNA. Like, ancient DNA for humans also is demonstrable of this.
Well, I agree that there are variations, but they don't add up. I don't know how you got that. They have tried for years to get varieties of dogs. I'm showing some here. There are now 339 recognized breeds of dogs. Show me the evidence. Science deals with what we can observe, study, and test. Show me the science that would make you think a dog came from anything that was a non-dog millions of years ago. All we've seen is, and you get a new generation, every year, sometimes twice a year. Where's the evidence of it ever being a non-dog? There's pictures from thousands of years ago, people having dogs. They're still dogs.
Well, a wolf is a non-dog.
Well, dog, wolf, and coyote can all interbreed. Now, we've decided to put wolf in a different category. We call it a different kind. But no, they crossbreed them all the time. Let's see.
Well, there are some kinds of wolves that cannot interbreed, like the maned wolf cannot interbreed with dogs. but it can interbreed with other kinds of canines.
So because these, and that's enough evidence to make you think a dog and a ladybug have a common ancestor?
No, that's enough evidence to make me think that a wolf is a non-dog. But we can move on to the fossil record, as that's kind of the main focus tonight.
Well,
Kent, you can add on.
And one more point on that. The last thing you said about wolves are non-dogs. Man is deciding all this classification stuff. The wolf doesn't care. Turn all the wolves loose. They go seek for another wolf to mate with, okay? And if they can't find one, they'll take a dog. There are coy wolves. There's a combination of a wolf and a coyote. Coy dog, a coyote and dog. The wolves, dogs, and coyotes can all interbreed. They normally don't, but they can. But they're so obviously, a 4-year-old will tell you that's the same kind of animal. Put all those dogs next to a banana or a ladybug, and they'll say, oh, those ladybug, they're different. So you're imagining that these little variations we see can somehow add up to these stupid family trees that they make. And it's just, I don't understand. There is no scientific evidence of any dog producing a non-dog, or what a 4-year-old would recognize as the same kind. But again, it's our classification. We're imposing this on them. They don't care. They know what their kind is, and they go seek their kind.
So I would say that there is scientific evidence that dogs came from wolves, which are non-dogs. And I think that lots of 4-year-olds would have difficulty if they were seeing a Chihuahua, a pug, and a wolf in comparison. I would assume that some of them would have difficulty thinking that they're all the same animal, just like maybe if you brought a Chihuahua back to prehistoric man and said, hey, this is the exact same kind of animal as a wolf. I would think that many of them would just not believe you.
Well, they may not see that, they may not, if they would not believe the dog and the wolf have a common ancestor, why on earth should we believe a dog and a banana have a common ancestor like you believe?
Because of their genetic similarities. But I want to focus tonight not on genetics, as that was a topic from last debate, and I want to focus on the fossil record. So if you're okay to move on to that portion of the debate.
Sure.
Okay, cool. So I want you to ask yourself, Kent and the audience, what do we see when we dig down into the earth? So the first observation that we make, if forget about if we didn't know anything about fossils, we didn't know anything about geology, and we're just, getting a shovel and we're just digging down. The very first observation that we would make is that there are horizontal layers of different compositions of, first soil and then rock. And that in the first topmost layers, we're going to find bones of animals that we will well recognize from living around the area. But as we start digging deeper and deeper, we will start to notice bones of animals that we don't recognize. Certain modern species that we were finding at layers above, we can no longer find the bones of. But these new animals, ones that don't exist currently on Earth, actually combine features of the modern animals that we're no longer finding in the same layer. So as an example, we stop finding bears and dogs, and we start finding fossil animals that share features unique to both bears and dogs. So these mosaic species are predicted by evolution.
Okay, I completely disagree. That is not what you find. I think you can probably find bears in any layer. But if you found a bear in a layer, they would change the name of that layer to be the layer that bears lived in. The geologic column does not exist anywhere in the world. It was made up years ago, 1830s. They say the top layer is younger. This textbook says top layer 10,000 years old, bottom layer 2.5 million. My question is real simple. How can the layers be different ages? Where's it coming from? Outer space? Are layers being added to the earth? All these layers are the same age. You take this thing and you flip it over and shuffle, it makes a bunch of different layers in minutes. The layers of the earth are all the same age. There's no such thing as a geologic column. And it's not true that the animals are not found in other layers than they're supposed to be. Trilobites are still alive today. They find them in the oldest rock layers. They're still alive. Yeah, they are. I'll show you. Baltic isopod, very similar. So your whole premise is that the layers are different ages. This geologic column does not exist anywhere in the world. If it did, it'd be 100 miles thick. And where are the new layers coming from? Nobody ever answers that. Moving it from here to here doesn't change the age of it. Shuffling a deck of cards doesn't make the top one younger. They're all the same age, all of them. Every speck of dirt on the planet is the same age. If there's any sorting to the animals, there's other answers for why. Hydrologic sorting. Clams are going to end up at the bottom generally.
Wait, hold on there because I will get to that, but that was more than just one point brought up, so I want to address some of that. But I will get to the clams and everything. Trust me, the clams are in here. So the first thing you were saying is that there are trilobites still existing. I don't think that's true. I think that those are isopods and they're morphologically different, not the same thing. The closest to trilobites you would get are probably like tadpole shrimp or something, but there's again not trilobites. So I want to be clear on that. And we do not find bears in every single layer, right? Once we stop finding bears in the layers below that, we start finding Mosaic fossils that have characteristics of bears, but other characteristics of other carnivoran mammals like dogs. So this is the order that we see. You say this multiple times that the geologic column does not exist, and then I've also seen you bring up the point that it does exist in North Dakota, but you just say that that's just a coincidence. But if you know that it does exist in the exact order that we put the geologic column in North Dakota at least, and other places, I mean, there's like 30 other places where it exists in all these layers in the order that you can find in your textbook. But I know that you're aware of the North Dakota example, so why do you keep saying that they don't exist? And I'll let you address those points, and then I'll get on to where the layers are coming from.
Years ago, somebody decided to call the layers different names: the Cenozoic, Mesozoic, Paleozoic, Archaeozoic, etc., and the Jurassic, Triassic, Mississippian, Devonian, Silurian. I taught earth science for 15 years. Those were arbitrarily chosen. Many of them are limestone, many of them, but they call it Jurassic limestone versus Cambrian limestone. Well, how do you tell the difference? By the fossils you find in them. So they're dating the fossils by the layers, and they're dating the layers by the fossils. It's complete circular reasoning. So I'll stand my ground. The geologic column does not exist. What they teach in the textbooks, that particular order, is found in one place, maybe 2 or 3 places. But that's just, I could shuffle thousands of decks of cards and say, eventually I'm going to end up with the ace of hearts on the top. That doesn't prove anything. You might eventually find those 12 index fossils in the right order that somebody said they should be in. Why aren't they that way in every place? Why is it such a rare event to find those 12 in the right order that they wanted them to be? It doesn't make any sense. If indeed this geologic column is true, they should be the same everywhere, and they're not. Would you agree there are fossils that are out of place? They call it OOP-art, out of place artifacts, out of place fossils. What about when they get to the top of Mount Everest and find clams? Are they out of place?
Yeah, so there are very, very few examples of these out-of-place fossils and artifacts. I mean, if we want to bring up a specific one, we can address that. For the clams on top of Mount Everest, this is a result of the fact that the actual material that makes up the top of Mount Everest used to be at the bottom of the ocean. We know that this is how mountains regularly form, is when two land masses collide. It will actually lift up the material that was at the ocean floor, and that is a natural part of the mountain forming process. So this is entirely explainable and expected if the Indian subcontinent collided with the Asian plate. So that's why we have clams on the top of Mount Everest. I think that if you acknowledge the fact that we can find on places on the earth where all these layers are in the exact order that they're taught in the textbooks, then it's a little bit cheeky to say that it doesn't exist when you can go and see it for yourself. And just saying that all of these are just mere coincidences. But yeah, if you want me to address where the layers are coming from, I can do that. Or if you wanted to interject now.
Sure, yeah. Well, we do a demo here when people come take the tour, and you're invited again, come take the tour. We shake up a jar that contains gravel, sand, and mud, clay, and water. It always settles into layers, every time. You can get those little sand art things. They always make layers. That's what they're for, to make cool layers. So the flood would have done the same thing. I agree, mountain building happens to some extent, but to say it's been going for millions of years certainly would not be a scientific statement. You couldn't prove that. It's just as logical to say the top of Mount Everest was the bottom of the ocean covered in clams during the flood. And at the end of the flood, Psalm 104 says the mountains arose, the valleys sank down, and the water rushed off. I think Mount Everest probably came up in a few hours or maybe a few months, not millions of years. The mountains are still lifting up and going down. Some places are subsiding, like the state of Louisiana subsiding some. So yes, I understand. I taught earth science, subsistence, and mountain building. I understand. But to say this Indian continent crashed into it, that's one theory. That's not a proven scientific fact. There are cracks all over the earth, fault lines, and they're still moving, some of them. And we have earthquakes and volcanoes, but it's not scientific that this has been going on for millions of years. We can only prove it's been going on for observable history.
So if the layers that we observe now were sorted and ordered in terms of their density, I would give you that point, but they're not. You can look at the average density for these layers, and you can see that they are not sorted by density. So if they're not sorted by density, it's obviously not being sorted by water, just like that little model you showed.
Well, this contains, I think, 3 different densities, white, gray, and black. But it will make 40 different layers. It's just the way hydrologic sorting works. So Noah's flood would have sorted the layers into multiple densities. And actually, most all of the layers were formed horizontally, not vertically. Watch the video, Experiments in Stratification by the French guy. Back at the Navy laboratory in Colorado, they have a flume about 2 feet wide and 2 feet deep and 80 feet long. Water runs through this thing constantly, and they pour sediments in. And it'll form 8 or 10 layers horizontally, not vertically. So as the tide the moon lifting the tide up and down during Noah's flood, well, if the tide's coming up, guess what? That means the water's coming in sideways to fill the bump. When the tide goes down, the water's going out sideways. So the up and down motion of the tide, and an uninterrupted tide on planet Earth would be about a 200-foot tidal change, a harmonic tide. So if the water's going up and down 200 feet, rushing in and out of the bump every 6 hours, 12 and a half minutes, it's going to make thousands of layers horizontally. That's why we have petrified trees standing up, connecting all these layers that you think are different ages. They can't be. Trees don't stand up that long after they die. Your whole premise is based on what you were taught about these layers being different ages. The geologic column does not exist. The order that they say it should exist may be found 1 or 2 places. Why aren't they in all the places?
So they're not in all the places because of things like erosion, unequal rates of sedimentation. There are numerous reasons why we would have unconformities, but the point is that the vast majority of them are in this order. Like if you find a certain layer, then you're always going to find certain layers on top and below it. And just the overall order of what you can expect to find above the layer and below the layer is conserved on the vast majority of all sites on Earth. Just to address quickly your question, or did you want to butt in there?
On the same topic. This is from a public school textbook about the geologic column. It contains limestone in 4 different places. How would you tell the difference between 100 million year old Jurassic limestone and 600 million year old Cambrian limestone? Both of these eras, Cambrian and Jurassic, contain limestone. How would you know the difference? What if a bear fossil was found in one? What is the difference between the limestone and the limestone?
Okay, so you could, 1, tell by what kind of fossils you would find in it, and 2, you could tell by what kind of igneous layers are located above and below it, because you can use radiometric dating on the igneous layers. But I know I said a trigger word there with radiometric dating. Since we talked about radiometric dating in the last debate, I didn't include a lot of that information in this one. So I didn't know if you wanted to get into the weeds on that, or if you wanted, I just kind of addressed where these layers are coming from. They're not coming from space. Igneous layers come from volcanic activity. Sedimentary layers come from sediments, which are eroded like material from other rock layers. And then you can have metamorphic rock layers. None of those are
Grayson.
Go ahead, Ken.
if it's eroding from here to here, making a sedimentary layer, which is what most of the geologic column is, sedimentary layer, it's only moving it from one spot to another. It doesn't change the age of it.
It doesn't change the age of the material, but it does change the age of the newly formed layer. Like the layer is dated from when it is formed. You're not actually dating the material that the layer is made up of.
So if I shuffle these cards, I can tell when this one was laid down. Wow, look at that, the 3 of spades. That was laid down before the 5 of diamonds. You're not getting it. Every speck of dirt is the same age. Moving it from here to here, or heating it up and cooking it and shooting it out in a volcano, it's still the same material.
Right. Kent, you would agree that my atoms are the same age as your atoms, right? And yet we are different ages. So that is a more applicable metaphor for the geological layers.
Okay. So what you're saying is we can tell when the geologic layer was assembled. All the particles are the same age. So the 100-million-year-old Jurassic limestone contains 600-million-year-old particles, but it was laid down 100 million years ago. Because there is limestone in each of the layers.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between the 100 million? How do I know if it's 100-million-year-old limestone or 600-million-year-old limestone? By the fossils. How do you know the age of the fossils? By the layer it came from. It's complete circular reasoning.
It's not just by the fossils. I agree that you can use fossils as a metric, but there are other metrics as well. Like you can look at the layers above and below that limestone and figure out, hey, if the layer above that limestone is an igneous layer and it dates to 320 million years ago, you know that the layer below it is older than 320 million years. So there are methods beyond just the circular reasoning of what fossils it contains that we can verify some of these other assumptions with.
All right. This is, let's see, American Journal of Science. 40 years ago, they knew this. Intelligent layman has long suspected circular reasoning in the use of rocks to date fossils and fossils to date rocks. The geologist has never bothered to think of a good reply. Encyclopedia Britannica, 70 years ago. Cannot be denied from a strictly philosophical standpoint. Geologists are arguing in a circle. Succession of organisms has been determined by a study of their remains in the rocks. The relative age of the rocks is determined by the organisms. Date the rocks by the fossils by the rocks. And we'll get into radiometric dating. Give me one more minute. Fossils have been and still are the best and most accurate method of dating and correlating the rocks. They don't date them by radiometric dating. I can think of no cases of radioactive decay being used to date fossils. And this is, 40 years ago. It's still true. Radiometric dating would not have been feasible if the geologic column had not been erected first. Geologic column is the Bible to the evolutionist. It does not exist anywhere. There's no simple way to look at a fossil and say how old it is unless you know the age of the rocks it comes from. Niles Eldredge, famous evolutionist. We date the rocks by the fossils. How can we then turn around and talk about patterns of evolutionary change through time? The rocks date the fossils, but the fossils date the rocks more accurately. It's circular reasoning. They can handle this circular reasoning several ways. We can ignore it, we can deny it, or we can admit it, or we just avoid it by pragmatic reasoning. I'm telling you, there is no geologic column. If you found a fossil anywhere in the world, first question they would ask is, where did you find it? So we can tell how old it is. Why do you need to know where I found it? Because they date the fossils by the layers, then they date the layers by the fossils. If it contains a trilobite, it's going to be assumed to be Cambrian, 600 million years old. If it contains a dinosaur bone, that's Jurassic, 70 million years ago. I know how they do it. It's dumb, real dumb, not true.
Yeah, so I'd just like to point out that all of those quotes conveniently ignore radiometric dating, but we don't just have to rely on radiometric dating in order to cross-verify these like dating methods based on like what fossils you find in the layers. We could also use things like dead zone layers and layers that are formed that have very specific and unique chemical compositions that occur all over the Earth. That I don't know how you account for in a flood, like the dead zone layer is a good example. You find rocks that could only form in an anoxic environment, meaning without oxygen, meaning that the there has to be very stagnant water, right? If you had like global tides and a global flood, you wouldn't find these anoxic conditions. And we find these dead zone layers like all over the earth, and we can date them based on their how close they are to different igneous layers above and below them. That gives us, based on the isotope ratios, a bounded range of years of which that layer could be formed in.
Okay. Grayson, this is a really big world we live on, okay? 25,000 miles around the equator. It's a really big world. Are there storms going on in the world right now someplace? Could there be some typhoons or hurricanes going on right now?
I think it's a safe bet.
That aren't affecting me at all. It's perfectly calm outside. I don't think Noah's flood was constant chaos on every square inch of the earth. There may have been some places for months where it was just, all you'd have to do is submerge the land for a couple of weeks and everybody's dead. Noah was in the ark for a year. That does not mean the flood covered the whole world for a year. Parts of it might have been covered for 3 weeks, and that's it. The crust of the earth is obviously cracked up like an eggshell. I think that happened at the beginning of the flood. So the plates of the earth would be shifting up and down during this flood. Some may have been exposed, and plants and stuff start growing again. Animals have a place to hide, or birds at least, or fish. Fish would have plenty of water. Insects would survive. So the fact that Noah's in the ark for a year does not mean it was constant chaos for 365 days. There are storms going on right now, not affecting me in Lenox, Alabama at all. So I think you have the wrong premise there with your flood. Go ahead.
But these layers that we observe, like these dead layers or these layers that correspond to mass global extinction events, are not just localized. We find them all over the earth. And what we find with them is very specific patterns where we can find certain kinds of fossils below these like dead zone layers, and we stop finding them above them because they represent extinction events. And I don't know how you could possibly explain that with a flood model either. But if you want to respond to that, and then I'll just get into back up to my script here with we were on Mosaic fossils.
Sure. You keep saying we find. Are you actually finding this stuff? You, or you trusting what somebody else tells you about it? You say we dig down into the earth. Have you ever dug down into the earth and found layers? I live in a gravel pit. We got layers right here. I can come show them to you. And they're all the same age.
So I have dug down to the earth and found layers, but I am not a geologist. So I am relying on the field of geology to say what we as a collective human species find whenever we dig. But
I agree the earth has layers. We have 7 layers of gravel right here. The layers of gravel that start in Alabama go to North Carolina, 500 miles away. How do you get a layer of gravel 500 miles, 7 of them, from here to North Carolina? I think maybe there was a global flood. Tide going up and down, rushing in and out would make layers. At our latitude, we're turning almost 900 miles an hour at this latitude, 31 degrees north. If the water's going 900 miles an hour for a couple hours, racing into that bump or out of that tidal bump, it's going to make gravel and roll them around like a rock tumbler, and they're all going to be rounded off. It's interesting. Gravel worldwide is rounded. They call it river rock. Guys, it's worldwide. That's not a river. That's the tide going up and down. Noah's flood. But the Bible's warned us that people would come who would be willingly ignorant of the flood. The flood explains all the layers, why are there fossils? Why are there fossils at all? Grayson, how many animals died in the last week in the world, and how many turned to stone? Millions, billions died, none fossilized that we know of. We don't see fossilization happening at all. And yet there are billions of fossils. Why can't you understand that would make one big catastrophe like the flood would probably make all the fossils in 1 year?
Well, I think that the permineralization process by which minerals replace bone in these fossils takes a little bit longer than a week. But we do find instances of modern species being buried in anoxic conditions where they don't degrade and would eventually form fossils. So the point that I was just on was Mosaic fossils, right? I just brought up the idea of dog bear fossils once we get down to layers below which we find dogs and bears. So in a creation model, which have separate trees of ancestry, one could reasonably expect to find some extinct kinds of animals. Kent might say, like before the flood or something, there were other kinds that we don't have now. And maybe even extinct kinds that had hybrid mosaic features of existing kinds. But evolution accurately predicts what these mosaics should look like, whereas the creation model simply accommodates them. And with using the creation model, we might expect that the distribution of mosaic kinds of fossils would be either random or maybe based on common design elements. But what we actually see when we dig up the fossils are mosaic animals that have properties of two or more modern animals in the same evolutionary clade. That is to say, animals that are closely, I wrote related genetically, but I'll just say they have similar genes, right? They have similar DNA. For example, dogs and bears have similar DNA to each other, and thus we should expect to find dog-bear fossils if evolution is correct. Humans and other four-legged animals have DNA that is more similar to lungfish than any other kinds of fish. Thus, we should expect to find a mosaic fossil between a tetrapod and a lobe-finned fish. How can Kent possibly explain the fact that we have mosaic fossils for species that are genetically close to each other, but not for animals that are distantly, who are genetically very distant? So this alone proves evolution.
No, this is a premise on your part. We find animals today alive that people would consider a mosaic. It's got a combination of features from a bunch of things. And what does that mean? All we've observed in human history is extinction. Certain species appear to be extinct. Where are the examples of anybody observing in the observable human history, the last, 4,000 years has been recorded? Where's the example of a new animal coming on the scene? I mean, a totally new animal. We get variations of the same kind. Now, big horses and little horses, but they're still horses. Has anybody observed any of these new animals? Your family trees that you believe in show an amoeba or a single-celled creature turning to everything. Where's the example of an amoeba turning to anything else besides an amoeba today? See, science is what we can observe. We observe bacteria produce bacteria. We don't observe anything else, nothing. Do you believe bacteria turned into whales and humans? I'll give you all the time you want.
Yeah, so this just gets into what we were talking about in the last debate with the law of monophily, where, even when you get a dinosaur changing into a bird, that's not a new kind. They're both still theropods. So that you're not getting you're going to get changes, varieties within the kind. And those varieties can get so distantly related that you might think, or a 5-year-old might think, that they were different kinds. But the law of monophily clearly demonstrates that a eukaryote will always, beget more eukaryotes. Mammals will always beget more mammals, etc.
Well, now hold it. If the law of monophily is true, the single-celled bacteria or protozoa or whatever it started, there's 20,000 different single-celled creatures. How did it get arms? Single-celled creatures don't have arms or legs or brains. Eukaryote simply means the nucleus is bound in a membrane. That's all that means. So there's two kinds. There's the prokaryote and eukaryote. That's two different classifications of life forms. So what? It doesn't prove any relationship. We never observe bacteria produce a non-bacteria. So how, if it stayed in its clade of bacteria, how did it turn to a whale? Bacteria don't have digestive tracts like that. They don't have skeletons. They don't have flippers. You're talking out of both sides of your mouth here, Grayson. If the law of monophily is true, then evolution isn't true, because everything stays the same. Dogs produce dogs. But you believe dogs came from an amoeba. So the law of monophily isn't true. Or evolution isn't true.
If a single-celled eukaryote evolved multicellularity and evolved arms, it's still a eukaryote. It's still the same kind its ancestor was. In the same manner that if wolves don't have spots like a Dalmatian, but a Dalmatian is still the same kind as a wolf. They're both canines. So it's the same sort of structure to this.
Well, all we have observed is dogs, wolves, and coyotes can be crossbred. They probably are the same kind or came from the same kind, and it looked like a dog. That's not evidence that they came from an amoeba. But
So
you guys make these
maned wolves cannot crossbreed with dogs.
So they might have diversified to where they can no longer crossbreed, but then like the Chihuahua and the Great Dane probably would have a hard time making babies. Be hard on Chihuahua, that's for sure. So the variations that happen are limited. This is what you guys don't get. The Bible says 24 times in the first 7 chapters. Put my screen. Sorry, not the screen back up. LDV 390 here. I thought I was showing the slides here. 390. 339 recognized breeds of dogs, and the Bible says they bring forth after their kind. 24 times. What is the best example you know of where somebody has observed a creature bring forth something that was not the same kind? Not find it in a fossil and draw a line and imagine it happened. Where do we observe this? There's an awful lot of...
Chlamydomonas.
What now?
Chlamydomonas, the single-celled algae that evolved multicellularity in a lab. That's an observation you were asking. What's a good example for this?
Okay.
I think any 4-year-old would be able to see that it's clearly a different kind.
Well, is it a colony working together, or is it actually multicellular?
It's truly multicellular. Yeah, it's not just a colony.
Does it as a single multicellular unit mate with another unit like that and produce another unit, or do they go back to
That's
single
not
cell?
The definition of multicellularity. You can have sexual or asexual modes of reproduction and still be multicellular.
Okay, but when they do produce babies, are they single-celled?
Well, when we produce babies, they're single-celled, right? But then they grow to be multicellular in the same way that Chlamydomonas does.
So Chlamydomonas, when it produces babies, does it produce a bunch of individual cells that have to clump together for the next generation? Or is it changing into something else? Is it
in the same way that we produce single-celled gametes, right, as humans, like we reproduce via single cells, the same way Chlamydomonas reproduces by a single cell that then replicates and becomes another version, like another daughter that's similar to the parent, that are these multicellular units that are like specialized. They have like not all the cells are reproducing, only the specific reproducing cells, like the germline, are reproducing in the same way that they are for us humans.
Okay, I understand completely. Now, what about the 3rd generation? What does that look like?
The same thing. Yeah, they are obligately multicellular, meaning like every generation follows this multicellular body plan.
So this multicellular body plan is now working as a single organism, and it now produces another single organism with multi-cells.
Yes.
Is that your claim?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And that is
it's
the
obligate,
process.
meaning this is, it's not, even when you take away the pressure of the predation, that is what caused this change. Even when you take that away, they continue to reproduce in this multicellular pattern. So they obligately.
And then what does it eventually become? Because this is a rapid, this thing is, what do they produce in a few days? You get a new generation, right?
Yeah.
I have to look up the time frame on that one. So have they observed this in the laboratory, grow bones and organs and skin and hair and start to walk?
No, they just observed it evolving multicellularity. So
one step of trillions of steps that would have to take place to turn it to a human or a whale.
Yeah. Well, you already acknowledged that that kinds can diversify enough to where they're no longer even, like, they're reproductively isolated. So that's speciation right there. If you acknowledge that, and you acknowledge that we can see multicellularity evolve, I mean, that seems, pretty much like a confirmation of evolution.
And that's enough to get you to believe these charts right here, that a protozoa could turn to a biology teacher. That one example you gave is enough to make you believe this and doubt the Bible.
No, it just confirms that evolution happens. We have to use more facts to confirm that chart, which I'm happy to do. We were just talking about Mosaic fossils.
Okay. Could it be that these original single cell were designed to clump together for defense or for stand against temperature changes or something? Maybe there's a reason. Maybe they're designed to do that, and that's so far as they ever go. That one step, bunch of single cells get together, and you want to call it an organism. I would call it more of a colony. I'll do more research on that. But even still, that's one step of trillions that would have to take place. And
yeah, so the counter to that is that if they were designed to do this, then we should see that in nature. And we never have found any chlamydomonas specimens in nature exhibiting this behavior. It's only when we've experimented on them in the lab and gotten them to make this obligate change. So this is not part of their normal life cycles. Right. If you want to say that God just designed them to be able to do this change, I think that that's getting pretty close to theistic evolution.
Well, I think people have discovered down through centuries that humans make some dramatic changes under extreme pressure. At concentration camps and tortures and things like that, they sweat blood, which doesn't normally happen. So the changes that are under extreme pressure so they did in the laboratory, were able to get these single cells to clump together, and you're calling it a new organism, and then that's as far as it went. My question is, did they actually make a new organism, or do you have to start over next time with more single cells?
Well, I would say that the fact that these changes are being inherited by the next generation means that it's a little bit different than just, like what your examples were. But then I'll also just say that the reason it's not a colony, right, is because when we observe colonies, each individual cell of the colony reproduces and it competes with all the other cells in the colony for resources. But in this example, the cells are differentiated into somatic cells that emit like extracellular matrix material, and then reproductive cells, which are the only cells that reproduce. That's not seen in colonies, and their resources each cell is not competing with the other cells for resources. Right. So those things differentiate it from a mere colony.
Okay.
But if you want to move on to continue a little bit about the Mosaic fossils.
I want to do some more research on that one, but I just want to point out to you, if this is true that in a laboratory only, this can be forced to happen, that makes you want to believe that it did happen in nature without the laboratory trillions of times to get these single cell creatures to become humans and whales. That is a giant leap of faith, Grayson. You have a religious belief. That's not science. We don't observe this happening. It happened one time in the laboratory under extreme pressure. Therefore, it can't happen in nature with nothing. I wish you would just admit you believe this to be true. You believe in evolution. And I wish you guys who do believe that would go start a private school and teach it to anybody else that wants to believe it. But it doesn't belong in a science class to show a chart like this to the kids. Boys and girls, we saw these cells get together in the laboratory. Therefore, you all came from a single cell. That's not science. This isn't observable.
Well, I believe things based on evidence, and I do think that evidence-based science should be taught in a classroom.
I agree. But the evidence shows us dogs produce dogs. That's the evidence. The evidence shows us there are limits. You may get a big dog or a little dog, but there are limits.
Well, the limits that you point out are just limits in the laws of physics and anatomy. I don't see how evolution breaks any laws of physics.
Well, if it went from a single cell to an elephant, they broke the limit there, didn't it?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, each single cell of your body, you probably have 100 trillion of them. Each one of those cells has about 100 trillion atoms, all arranged precisely. And each one of those cells is more complicated than the space shuttle. And the DNA code in one of your cells is more complex than the computer system of the world.
Mm-hmm.
It is dreaming to think this happened by chance.
Well,
And you're
I don't say that it happened by chance, obviously. I mean, there are guiding processes such as natural selection. It's not just chance. But I will say that complexity of it in it of itself is not a very good gauge to see if something was designed or not. Typically, when we know that things are designed, like a pen or whatever example you have, it's because we have evidence of these things being designed. Now, with humans and DNA, we have evidence of not design. For example, if you have children, right, then your children's DNA is going to be a totally new code from either you or your partner that their specific DNA code is never going to have existed before. And yet it's way more complicated than a space shuttle, like you said. And yet it didn't require anyone to design it, right? It's a result of genetic recombination and natural processes. And yet it's so much more complicated than all of these other things. So the reason why we think that things are designed is we have evidence that they're designed. And in the case of genetics and human reproduction, we actually have evidence that it can occur completely without design, and you can get totally new DNA sequences without any design input from a designer.
Well, that's like saying we can dump letters of the alphabet out and write books. The letters themselves are designed. I'll give you that. I'll give you a truckload of just letters of the alphabet. Dump them out, try to get a book, try to get a sentence that makes any sense. It just won't happen. The design in your cell is way more than you're giving credit for here. So if the fact that a sperm and an egg can get together and make a baby, each one of those, the sperm and the egg, are mind-boggling in their complexity. And the fact that they can get together and the code line up and the DNA unwind and join back together again is stunning. I don't have a problem just praising God for, wow, that's amazing, God, thank you. I'm glad you made it that way, and I'm glad you made it so fun to do that, to admit it that way. So that's the way he did it.
Okay, so in the interest of time, I think I want to move on back to the fossil record. We were just talking about mosaic fossils. So with creation, right, we should expect to find mosaic fossils for animals sharing characteristics between two separate kinds that evolution would say are distantly related. Right? We should expect to find those examples if evolution is not true and creation is true. So, for example, we never find any dolphin shark mosaics or dog monkey mosaics or lobster scorpions or kangaroo mammoths or any examples other than the evolutionary predictions. So the evolutionary predictions, for example, like mosaics of dinosaurs and birds, or mammals and synapsids, whales and hooved land animals, humans and chimpanzee-like apes. So we find all of these fossils in the fossil record, and they're ordered into layers corresponding to the layers of different types of rocks. So kind of just about the order that we were talking about before. Sure.
Okay. You are claiming tonight, if I heard you right, that there are mosaic fossils showing that dinosaurs and birds are related.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming you're thinking of Archaeopteryx or something like that.
That's a good example, sure.
Okay, you understand that birds are warm-blooded, reptiles are cold-blooded. There's a vast difference there.
And dinosaurs are warm-blooded.
Dinosaurs were warm-blooded?
Yes.
How do you know that?
We have fossil evidence to suggest that they're warm-blooded based on their body plans and the way that their bodies were shaped. Is not really viable to have a cold-blooded animal with those kinds of body plans. And we also have evidence from their blood capillary structures that we have found in the fossil record. So we have plenty of evidence that they are warm-blooded.
I'd have to see that. That'd have to be proven to me. Okay, let's take the hoofed animal and the whale. Sure. Would you agree that whales don't have hooves?
I would, yes.
Okay. So what is the transition animal between the whale and the cow?
Well, there wouldn't be a transition between a whale and a cow. The hooved animal that evolved into whales was much smaller and kind of like, it almost kind of resembles like a larger shrew or like rodent, but it had hooves. We actually find the fossils of this. I think it's It's the ancestor of Pakicetus. I don't remember the exact scientific name for it now, but we find whales that then have 4 limbs, like Basilosaurus. And so we actually see them losing their hind limbs up to the modern day in the fossil record through these mosaic forms.
No, why is a bone in the dirt able to do this, but no animal today can do this? This is not science. What we observe today is dogs produce dogs, whales produce whales, but you are imagining that a bone you found in the dirt that you think you can put between the two is the ancestor or the change from one to the other. Do it again. Let's take a hoofed animal and turn it to a whale again. Or let's take a reptile, or let's take a dinosaur, or let's take any kind of lizard and turn it into a bird. It just doesn't happen. That's my point that you're not getting. Science is what we can observe, study, and test. Show me where it happens today.
Sure. We do see evidence for animals today, like terrestrial land animals today, evolving for a more aquatic lifestyle. So like we've seen this in like Western Canada, where the wolves have been losing their habitat because of like deforestation and et cetera. And they've actually been having to spend more of their time swimming and hunting for prey in the water. And we've actually noticed since the 70s that they have had anatomical changes to have like, more webbed feet and limb proportions that are better adapted for swimming. So we can see this transitioning happening today. And I'm not saying that in the past there was anything different going on. The changes generation to generation are about the same degree as the generational differences we see today. It's not like there's anything different going on in the past. I just saw that we only have about like 5 minutes left. And that's kind of crazy to me. That time went by so fast. I didn't even get to a lot of the points that I wanted to talk about. So that's unfortunate.
Well, I'm still stuck. You're saying wolves they're deforesting Canada, and so they have to swim more, and so they're developing web feet, turning into a duck or something. Is that your point, or what?
Well, no, they're just adapting to a more aquatic lifestyle in the same manner that we saw in the early stages of whale evolution as reflected in the fossil record. So there's nothing magical happening about these past animals. It's the same thing that we see today. Over time, microevolutionary changes add up to macroevolutionary changes. It's just a number of generations. That's the only difference.
I know you believe that. Now, would you agree that humans have a web between their fingers, a little bit of skin there? Some have more than others. Wolves already have, wolves and dogs already have a little web of skin between their toes. They already have that. If indeed only those with a slightly bigger web could survive to swim after their prey or whatever, then they're the only ones alive to breed the next generation. That's natural selection. That's not creating anything. They already had the web. It selected the bigger ones to survive. If we had a situation where we lived on an island and all the fruit was, so far off the ground, only tall people could reach it. Eventually, only tall people can make babies. Then pretty soon you got an island full of tall people. You didn't create anything. You selected a slice of the already existing gene code. That's all. That's not evolution. That's natural selection. Has nothing to do with evolution. It selects. But you're wanting to say that this selection process of bigger webs on the wolf's foot or whatever can create something, and it doesn't. There's no creation.
I agree with you that natural selection only selects; it doesn't create. What creates is the mutation process. But they're just okay. I'll try to summarize. We're not going to be able to get to all my points. I'm just going to try to summarize where I was going with this. Right. So I was going to continue to describe what we see as we go down, and we get to more and more simple and more basal organisms, and we get past clams. That's why I wanted to address. Clams are not the bottom like you claim. It goes below that, where you get weird organisms that don't resemble anything that lives today in the Ediacaran period, and they have strange shapes and body plans, a little bit more complicated than sponges. I mean, they're nothing like what we see today. And then when you dig deeper than that, you find only stromatolites and other single-celled organisms and those fossils. So it goes below clams, and I don't think that there's any rational way to explain the neat ordering that we see in the fossil record. And I know that you point to habitat and different body densities and different mobility strategies and different levels of intelligence. So the example that I wanted to bring up, because you love bringing up SpongeBob so much, I wanted to bring up his arch nemesis, plankton. So we actually find plankton fossils in just about every layer, from modern layers to the Cambrian, right? These are not sorted according to, like the plankton are in all the layers. And the actual fossil plankton that we find do change based on more derived characteristics on the top and more basal characteristics on the bottom. And we see the same kind of patterns in the plankton and how they separate out against all these layers. And the cool thing about plankton is that they have the same body density as other plankton, the same amount of intelligence. They live in the same habitat. They have to live near the surface of the water to get sunlight, and they have the same mobility. So it wipes away all of these factors that you say could be potentially causing the ordering that we observe, but we still observe that these plankton fossils are neatly ordered according to the different layers, and only evolution can explain that. And I don't see how you could explain that possibly in a creation model.
How many varieties of plankton are there right now?
There's a lot.
And so you're saying because there are different kinds of plankton found in different layers. My phone's not working in the metal building, right? I'd answered the question for myself. So therefore, because we see these variations in plankton, could it be that a global flood with the tide going up and down would deposit one colony of plankton at one time, and 3 weeks later, another colony that happens to be moved into the area for different conditions, water temperature, salinity, whatever? I'll do some research on plankton. I can't get Google to work at all. But that's not evidence that we came from an amoeba and that whales and bananas are related. What we observe is dogs produce dogs. That's all. So all you've shared with us all evening is your belief that if we gave it billions of years, it would change to something else. We're not seeing anything change to anything else. I had 3 kids. They're all human. They had grandkids. They're all human. I'd be willing to predict the great-grandkids will be human too. I'd bet you $5 on that. Well, $3 is all I got. But okay.
Okay, so as long as we're doing predictions, right? And I will say that the water would not affect the plankton layering like that. And if that were the case, we would expect to see the layers different based on where we are on Earth, and we would expect to see, like, local variation in the layered sorting of these plankton fossils, which we don't see. We see them according to the evolutionary prediction. But speaking of evolutionary prediction, this is the last topic that I wanted to discuss before the Age of the Earth stuff. I still hope we can maybe make some time for that, but I'll just be very quick. I wanted to bring up my favorite example of, or one of my favorite examples of a prediction made by evolution, Tiktaalik. So I already said that humans are the most, and tetrapods are most similar to lobed fin fishes. So we would predict to find a mosaic fossil that shows characteristics of both. So for years, scientists had theorized about this transition. And they knew that based on evolutionary theory that this should have occurred sometime within the Devonian period. And we know what layers are associated with the Devonian period. So the scientists went and did a survey and figured out that those layers are very near the surface in a very far northern island in Canada, right? So they knew where to look. They knew what they wanted to find. So they went there, and in 2004, they found exactly what evolution predicted: a lobed finned fish with wrist bones, lungs, and a neck. Okay, how many fishes have necks or wrists? It was a mosaic fossil that could breathe air and walk on land, but still had fins and other features of fish. Tiktaalik. It doesn't matter whether these specimens had children or not, or what their parents looked like. Scientists used the theory of evolution to predict exactly what type of mosaic fossil we should find, and they predicted exactly where to find it, and the proof was there to confirm evolution. So the fossil exists, and thus evolution's prediction was validated.
Let me unmute. Can't go ahead with your response. And I think, gentlemen, we'll have to make this the final topic for tonight in order for us to get to some audience questions. So I appreciate that, Grayson. Time has flown by. I agree. Great discussion so far. Love the format. I believe we need to do more debates with this more free-flowing format. So Kent, whenever you're ready, go ahead with your response to Grayson's point there on TikTok.
If this was a court of law and he gave that as evidence for evolution, a freshman law student would say, Your Honor, you find fossils that have unusual traits. Let's call it Tiktaalik, okay? You don't know that it wasn't part of a whole population that now went extinct. We don't see it happening today. No fish today are growing necks and growing limbs like that. There are some.
I'll actually grant you that. Sorry to cut you off, but I'm okay with granting you that Tiktaalik never had any kids and would extinct. It doesn't matter for my argument. The only argument is that it exists and has those features. It doesn't matter if it had kids or not.
There are many animals today that exist and have features of different varieties. There are variations within the same kind or variations. A lot of animals are unique. And where does the octopus fit into here? I'll be doing tomorrow night making babies on octopus. How did that evolve exactly? Where does that intermediate between? We'll get into that another time, but let's.
So is your point then that it was just a coincidence that the scientists found exactly what they predicted to find in exactly the layers that they predicted to find it? It's just a coincidence.
Well, first, I don't know that all that's true. You've been taught that it's true. I'll do some checking on that. But I predict if you dig down in the dirt, you'll probably find dead creatures that died, fossils, and they'll be dead. I predict that nearly all the fossils that are found, something similar to it is alive today. They find fossils of all kinds of animals that look they find fossil turtles. There's an article came out today. Somebody sent me turtles all the way down. Well, why is there fossil turtles from the very beginning all the way up through all the different layers? Why haven't they changed? We now have varieties of turtles, tortoises and turtles. They're still turtles. So I think you've been brainwashed, Grayson, into believing that what we see is evidence that evolution is true. Nobody's ever seen a Tiktaalik produce a non-Tiktaalik. It just hasn't been seen. But they hailed this as powerful rebuttal to religious creationists.
So Ken, I'm okay to let you have the last word on that. If we can maybe just real quick, maybe have a lightning round for the age of the earth stuff, because I did do some research to debunk some of your points on this.
Well, what we can do, gentlemen, okay, yep. Can't go ahead.
Yeah, before we do that, that should be a whole separate debate. But understand, the age of the earth, if the earth could be proven to not be billions of years old, would you admit your whole argument collapses on evolution because just simply for lack of time?
Yes.
Okay, so if there's one proof that the earth is not billions of years old, any one, your argument would collapse. Any one that's irrefutable, if you could refute 10 out of 20, okay, your argument still collapses. Let's do that another night on the age of the earth. I've been wanting to get a lot more updated slides in my material anyway, so that'd be perfect.
Sure, well, I'll debunk everyone.
Okay.
Okay, gentlemen. Excellent debate. That would probably make for an epic round 3 endgame debate. So this was round 2, and I really like the fact that we had basically all of discussion here, and so we got plenty of time for audience questions. But with over an hour of back and forth discussion, I do think it's appropriate, gentlemen. Let's have let's say 2 minutes each just to wrap up our thoughts and points. We can consider it kind of a closing statement, but at least that way we can, make sure anything is addressed that we want to and nothing is left hanging. So great discussion again. Grayson, let's start with you. Take up to 2 minutes, wrap up your thoughts, wrap up your points before we move into the audience questions. So go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay, well, Donny knows that I don't really like concluding statements, but I'll try my best here. Basically, the two main points that I was trying to make were the existence of Mosaic fossils and then the ordering of the fossil record that we observe. So those are the two main evidences that I brought to the table. I don't think that Kent can adequately explain the ordering of the fossils. I don't think that a global flood can account for these things because they're not sorted based on density. They're not sorted based on any of the factors that he points to, as I clearly showed with the plankton fossils. And yeah, the existence of mosaic fossils and what kinds of mosaic fossils and where we find them exactly aligns with the evolutionary prediction. And I don't think that creationists can have any retort to that other than just saying it's all one massive string of coincidences. So the last point that I'll just make, it's something really tiny. It's just that a geologic column. I think everybody knows what Kent is talking about when he says this, but I just want to make it clear that that is not the actual scientific terminology. He means to say either stratigraphic column or stratigraphic record or the fossil record. The geologic column is not a scientific term, although I think I know what he means when he says it. So I'll just leave it at that.
Grayson, appreciate the closing words there. And Kent, we'll hand it over to you. We'll give you 2 minutes as well. And then we're going to jump into some of these excellent questions. The audience has been great tonight. We've had well over 300 people enjoying this debate live. So with that, Kent, over to you. 2 minutes. Whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
All right. I would point out again, Your Honor, there is no such thing as a fossil record. There are fossils, trillions of them probably. None of them talk. None of them have a date stamped on them. There is an arbitrary order put on by scientists who find them. They say, oh, this ought to go here and this ought to go here. But the fossils themselves only indicate they died. You could not prove they had any children. You could not prove they had children that were different. And all of his arguments tonight were based on this fossil looks, intermediate between. Wait. The fossil is dead. You don't know it had any children, and it might be something that went extinct. There's no such thing as a fossil record, and the ordering of fossils, you're assuming, that the flood of Noah was pure chaos over every square inch of the earth at all time. There would be vastly different conditions on different parts of the earth, just like there are right this minute now. There might be a typhoon or hurricane going on someplace, or a tornado, not affecting me. So when you get a globe that big, I think you'd have, during Noah's flood, some areas where it'd be nice and tranquil. Some might be really freezing cold. I think the polar ice got dumped on there very quickly during the flood. I think the crust of the earth flexing up and down. There'd be so many variables, but it would not be constant chaos over every square inch. There's chaos right now in the world in some places, but it's not affecting other places. So I think you have a misunderstanding of the flood, which is what the Bible said would happen. The scoffers would be willingly ignorant of the creation, what it was like, and the flood. I think you'd also like to point out that nearly all of the fossils that are found are bigger than the creatures alive today. Fossil grasshoppers, fossil centipedes, 6 feet long. Fossil ducks, 550-pound ducks. Things were much bigger in the fossils. Those are ones that drowned in the flood. So that would match the Bible view that before the flood, everything lived longer and grew bigger, and God made a perfect world, and man started wrecking it, woman, and then the flood really messed it up. So I think the Bible is vindicated by the fossil record, by the fossils that we find. They indicate fossils aren't forming today. All the fossils indicate a rapid burial. You don't get a fossil unless you bury it right away under the right conditions. And that is provided by the flood. He brought up 40 more points. We'll do that another time. But yeah, let's get to audience questions there, brother. Go ahead.
Okay, Kent, thank you so much for that closing statement. Definitely a lot of fun in that discussion, and the 60-minute discussion went by quickly. And I want to thank you both for giving me a very easy debate to moderate as I keep up with our very lively live chat tonight and save all of these questions. So I'll put a timer on the audience Q&A because we could literally do these for the next week. We have so many. And once the timer goes off, we'll wrap it up. So here we go. First question comes in from, let's see what we can start with here. Actually, we've got a lot. Why don't we start with, okay, we'll start with a question from C Science Film Labs. Thank you so much there, C Science. And so questions for Grayson. How do you explain the existence of fossils of modern animals? So maybe he's referring to living fossils, argument from Stasis, like the Turitara or the venomous shrew. Go ahead, Grayson, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, so the first point that I'll make on this is that if you actually do a close examination of these fossils compared to the modern extant living species, you'll see that there are some small differences. But I do understand his overall point is that the differences are quite small. And it takes like an expert to be able to see the morphological differences. So the explanation for that is that these animals are existing within ecological niches, right? They're fulfilling certain roles in their environment. So they're going to be evolved and adapted to those niches. And so as long as those niches are not changing very much, that is to say that there's no new animals coming that compete with them for their resources or compete to challenge their role in the ecology, or as long as the climate doesn't change, as long as that niche is still a viable way for it to make a successful living, then it doesn't need to change that much. And in fact, most changes would be detrimental to its ability to perform that niche. So as long as, like, for example, a crocodile is pretty dang good at what a crocodile does, it fulfills its niche very well. And as long as there's no competition for the crocodile, as long as the environment doesn't change drastically, then it has no evolutionary pressure to change its morphology very drastically. So we would expect it to persist in a very similar shape over millions of years, as long as the evolutionary pressures that are facing it are not changing as well.
Appreciate it there, Grayson. Kent, over to you. The floor is yours.
How do I explain it? Well, God made everything about 6,000 years ago. There was a big flood 4,400 years ago, drowned all kinds of creatures. That's why we find fossils at all. And the polystrata fossils running through different layers indicate the layers are not different ages. So I think we would find lots of examples besides those two. I bet there are hundreds of examples of fossils that are found of animals that are still alive today and look nearly identical, usually bigger than the modern counterparts. So I think that's classic proof of Noah's flood being true and the Bible being true. God said 24 times in the first 7 chapters, they'll bring forth after their kind. And shrews always make baby shrews every time.
Okay, appreciate the response there, Kent. Grayson, question was for you. You can have the quick final word. Go ahead.
We can just move to the next question. I think I said everything I needed to say.
All right, appreciate that. And okay, next question comes in from Bad Influence, and appreciate the support there, Bad Influence, and also the question. And the question's for Grayson. So the questioner is asking, if natural selection drives evolution, do you think a single-celled creature had the information in its DNA code to make bones, eyes, skin, etc., since it became human over billions of years? Go ahead, Grayson.
No, clearly not. So like we touched on earlier in the debate, the actual the creation of new information would be coming from mutations. And I know that the common rebuttal for this is to say, oh, mutations, they never create new information. They're never beneficial. So I'll just kind of preempt what Kent will say on this, and I'll just point to one of my favorite examples of a beneficial mutation that added new information, nyelinase. So it was a duplication and frame shift mutation in a bacteria that created an entirely new family of proteins that was capable of breaking down nylon, which did not even exist prior to the 20th century. So that is a great example right there of a observed mutation that added information that was beneficial for the organism. And I can point to others for like in Lenski's experiment with the citrate transporter, etc. There's lots of examples of this.
Thank you, Grayson. Kent, if there's anything you'd like to add, go ahead. Floor is yours.
Well, natural selection does not drive evolution. There's no evolution. So the question would contain, the words need to be defined. Natural selection can only select what's already available to select from. And so the idea that a single-celled creature, it does not have the information to make bones, eyes, skin, and you're not going to add that information by continually selecting a selection process on any single-celled creature. So I think it's a very excellent question, and the evolutionists can't answer it other than dodge around the question like we just heard. So it is not going to turn to a human. You're not going to see this happen. Even then, I would point out the obvious. It only can take place long ago and far away in the imagination. There's lots of bacteria today, like quadrillions of them. Let's do it again. Let's make another human in the lab starting from bacteria. They only rely on the unseen, unprovable past, which is why I say over and over, evolution's a religion, nothing more.
Thank you, Kat.
Right, so
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I would just say that it's not a dodge. I mean, I clearly agree with you that natural selection doesn't create, it only selects from what's already there. And what determines what's already there is mutations. So you can change what's there and you can add information with mutations. The example I gave was a frame shift, a duplication and a frame shifting mutation that created a totally new family of proteins never before seen on Earth that could have a novel chemical function that no other living organism can do, breaking down nylon. So that, I know people can say, oh, but it's still just a bacteria, but that's not what I'm illustrating. I'm illustrating that beneficial mutations that add new information objectively, measurably, verifiably exist, and we can prove it.
Appreciate that. Did you want to give Kent the opportunity to give his thoughts on the nylon digesting bacteria before we move on, Grayson?
Only if I am able to respond to what he says, because it was
Sure.
my question, so I kind of have the last word.
Yeah, I'm fine. We're done.
Okay, just want to make sure you guys feel like you're able to address each other's points in their entirety. So here we go. Next question comes in from Boomer21. $5 super chat. Thank you so much, Boomer. And question for Grayson. If evolution is true, then how do you explain human footprints being found amongst dinosaur footprints?
Yeah, I would just say that the human footprints are either not human footprints or they are from a different time period. So I'd have to see the exact example, but I'm pretty sure that you're not going to find what they're claiming that you find.
Thank you, Grayson. And Kat, over to you if there's anything you wanted to add.
I have been to places where they exist and walked in them myself. They do exist. It is true, but we don't need to find the footprints together. Nobody's ever found human and frog footprints in the same rock strata, but frogs and humans exist together right now, okay? But if the dinosaurs are still alive, what if there are some still alive? There have been thousands of reported sightings in like the Congo, Africa. If a dinosaur were captured in the swamp and brought to the Brooklyn Zoo and put in a cage, you could go see it and pet it and feel it. The atheists would say, this one survived for 70 million years. They will not phase they're so committed to their religion, nothing will convince them otherwise. So catching a dinosaur and putting it in the zoo would not change their religion. They are determined to stick with their religion. Rather than say, wow, maybe we're wrong. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Kent. Grayson, final word.
Yeah, so I think that most people would find it a very silly thing to say that there are dinosaurs that are still alive out there, like the Loch Ness Monster, or somewhere in Central Africa, you're going to find a T-Rex or something. But I think that's a little bit ridiculous. I mean, they're very large. We would know if they were existing. But if we did happen to find one, that would just be another example, like the coelacanth, or, the tadpole shrimp, or these other animals that we already talked about. So I would agree with what Kent's saying, that would not disprove evolution if we found a dinosaur alive today. But I think it's a very silly thing to think that we would find such a thing.
Okay, thank you. Grayson, on to the next question. Kent, one of your best friends here, has a question for you coming in from Atheist Junior. And so the question is, Kent, why do you say the words favored races in the title of, I guess this has to do with Darwin's book, Origin of Species? He says means black or white human races when it actually means extant species. Do you have any thoughts on that, Kent?
Well, yes, on my video number 5, I cover this in great detail. Darwin was during the time frame of great racism in the world, when there was a lot of teaching that black people are inferior to white people. That was what the teaching was. There was still slavery in America at the time, 1859, when he wrote his book. We had our Civil War right after that. But I think that Darwin did mean various other species of creatures as well as humans. Many people during that time frame thought that the different skin colors indicated a totally different species of human, and they had mankind divided up. So I think Atheist Junior, who loves atheism because it gives him an excuse for all kinds of things that go against God's word, it's the title of the book was The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection or the Preservation of Favored Races, in the struggle for life. So if I watch my video number 5 where I talk about this in great detail and show lots of slides. It took me a minute to get it up here, but I think he's grasping at straws here, desperately grasping at straws. Atheist Junior is. By the way, Atheist Junior, open challenge right here. This program, Donny, would you schedule a debate for me and Atheist Junior again?
Let's do it. January 2023 or sometime in 2023, round 3.
Anytime. Anytime, AJ.
Okay. And I think it'd be fun. We could even do a similar format to tonight's format, which everybody seemed to enjoy. So appreciate the response, Kent. Grayson, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah. So what he's saying is true. What AJ is saying is true, that in the title of The Origin of Species, races does not refer to human races like white or black. Like favored races is just him describing the evolutionary process. Like the races is referring to like subspecies and species of animals. So it's just it's 19th century terminology. So saying that he's referring to human races is not accurate. And even if we accept the fact that Charles Darwin was some kind of like raging racist, that wouldn't change the veracity of his theory. Like, I mean, if the most racist person on the planet, like thousands of years ago, invented trigonometry, that doesn't mean that trigonometry is not true just because they were a racist. So, I think it's just sort of, it's kind of a non sequitur dig to try to say, that thinking evolution is true is going to somehow make you racist or something like that. I don't think it has much to do with the science.
Thank you, Grayson. Kent, question was for you if you wanted the last word there, brother.
Sure. I think anybody with any knowledge of history would point out that there have been fairly recent examples where someone, because of their belief in evolution, like Adolf Hitler, a strong believer in evolution, wanted to wipe out the inferior races. He thought Jews were inferior. I show on my video 5 the list Hitler was going on. The blonde-haired, blue-eyed, superior race. The Germans were the superior race. The black Africans were near the bottom of the Jews were at the bottom. Black people were next to the bottom. Hitler was a racist because of his belief in evolution. So whether Darwin was or not, I guess we could have a discussion on that, but certainly it has influenced other people to follow that and say, wow, if evolution's true, I'm going to be the strongest. Only the strongest survive. I'm wiping out the rest. So it has greatly affected history, including my dad fighting in World War II. Go ahead.
Thank you, Kent. Next question comes in. It looks like it's a question on one of your favorite topics there, Grayson. So a late Christmas present from 777 Discipleship. 777, maybe a nod to the 777 Club, Kent, that you have going on. So appreciate the support. And question for Gray. If the Big Bang happened, then how come some of the planets are spinning backwards?
Right. So there's no reason to assume anything about angular momentum of planetary bodies because of the Big Bang, right? The Big Bang is not some kind of explosion or anything like that. It's a metric expansion of the scale of space, right? So there would be no reason why everything should have the same direction of spin or the same angular momentum. The Big Bang doesn't have anything to do with that. I mean, the reason that some planets spin backwards is because of the way that they aggregated because of gravity and the different collision events that occurred in their past. So this has nothing to do with the Big Bang. It's a totally different theory of science. It's the nebular, like the solar nebular model. I mean, this has nothing to do with the Big Bang. They're separated by billions of years. Big Bang 13.7 billion years ago. The solar system formed 4.6 billion years ago, give or take. So they're separated by billions of years, totally different theories, and don't really have much to do with each other. The Big Bang does not say anything about the angular momentum or direction of spin of planets.
Okay, thank you so much, Grayson. Kent, anything you'd like to add? The floor is yours.
Well, I think anybody who studies Earth science or space would say that all the planets that we observe do have a spin to them. Where did this momentum come from? Either the initial object that exploded, the Big Bang, was spinning and imparted that spin to all the objects, or all of them picked up the spin after they were exploding. If a hand grenade explodes and the fragments fly out, do they spin or do they just fly like a bullet? they have to have a spin at the beginning to keep up that spin as they travel. So you do have a serious problem with 2 planets and several moons spinning backwards. And I cover that in my video number 1, why do the planets spin backwards? That you have to have the initial spin. And of course, the much bigger question is, where did this energy come from? How much energy would it take to spin a planet like the Earth, which is a tiny one compared to the big ones? Do it. You get out there and push it and see if you can get it spinning. Or better yet, get out there and see if you can stop it from spinning. There's a huge amount of mass that's spinning, 1,100 or 1,038 miles an hour at the equator. Where did this energy come from? It is a problem. The angular momentum problem of some planets, Venus and Uranus spinning backwards, is a problem. And many people have talked about that, about the tides. And I can't find my slides right now. I got 80,000 slides, but I covered that in video number 1. I think it is a problem. And if the Big Bang happened, if the initial object wasn't spinning, how did all the fragments pick up a spin? Because all the planets and moons and galaxies are spinning. I think you'd have a bigger problem than you want to admit.
Yeah. So the issue is that there is no initial object, right? This is not a classical explosion. Okay. This is an expansion of space between objects. So nothing about the expansion of the space between things would cause any kind of angular momentum or spin. So the spin itself derives from how these bodies were formed when you have these like massive clouds of molecular dust start to aggregate because of gravity. The gravity is what's supplying the energy, and thus the mass is supplying the gravity, which is the reason why as these things come together, they begin to adopt a certain spin. And this is a result of the mechanics of how these things are aggregating. Okay, that's what's going to impart the spin. And if they have collision events with other large bodies, that's going to change the spin properties. It could even change direction depending on the exact collision. So the question of where the initial energy came from in the Big Bang is a little bit off topic. The short answer is nobody knows. And the main issue is that whenever you're thinking of an explosion, you have an object exploding, and the shrapnel has a conservation of angular momentum. Yes, because that's a classical explosion using Newtonian physics. The Big Bang, right, is a relativistic event of the expansion of space-time. You would not use Newtonian mechanics of an explosion to describe such an event. You're just simply using the wrong mathematics.
Okay, thank you, Grayson, for the final word. Next one comes in from Mitchell. Mitchell, thanks for your question, support, and again, it is a question for Grayson. So Mitchell is asking if you can adequately explain the firefly, in brackets he puts bioluminescence, without invoking convergent evolution as a rescue device.
Yeah, so just to explain that, I mean, I'm not extremely well read on the exact mechanisms on the firefly evolution of bioluminescence, but just knowing what I do know from the biochemical pathways and structures that lead to bioluminescence, it's not a big deal to think that a mutation would change the chemical structure of an enzyme, which would give it bioluminescent properties that would be advantageous for the animal. So I don't really see any need to bring up convergent evolution if we can see the precursor enzymes in similar organisms to the firefly. If we can see, oh yeah, this is a close chemical structure to the bioluminescent molecule in fireflies, and it would only take this mutation chain to create a bioluminescent structure. There's no need to invoke convergent evolution. A mutation is capable of explaining this.
Okay, thank you, Grayson. Kent, if there's anything you'd like to add, go ahead.
Yeah, that was a classic example of his religion. He believes this could happen. Do it again in the laboratory. Get an animal and give it a firefly capability of bioluminescence. I'd like to have that sometimes when I'm out in the dark trying to wander around, find my way in. I'd like to be able to glow and find my own flashlight to the door. So why don't humans have this? So it is a classic example of what he's done all evening here. Show what he thinks could happen if we have billions of years. If one animal did get that mutation, now what? You got to have another one with the same mutation of the opposite sex in the same place. and they got to take over the whole population of the world. Got to kill everybody else. Okay, go ahead, Grayson.
Okay, so this is a common misconception, right? So if you have one animal, okay, first of all, I would say that humans probably have not developed bioluminescence because evolution has to act on what's already existing, right? The mutation has to occur to a pre-existing structure. So our chemical structures of our enzymes are not close to bioluminescent enzymes. But the prediction of evolution would be that in the firefly's lineage, and its related clade, there would be examples of such enzymatic systems that are close to bioluminescent and would require a small number or even just a single nucleotide change in a mutation to develop bioluminescent properties that would then be acted on by natural selection. And you only need that to occur once. You don't need that to happen twice in a male and a female pair, right? This is not like every mutation is not recessive. Okay, so there are going to be dominant mutations where you can be heterozygous for the mutation and you just still display this trait. That's what dominance is in genetics. So you don't require multiple copies. It only has to occur in a mutation. Only has to occur in one organism. It doesn't have to occur in its mate for it to pass on that mutation to the population. And through things like genetic drift and natural selection, then you have a substitution effect where that mutation spreads to the rest of the population. You don't have to kill off every member of the population. I got news. Everyone dies. So like over the generations, everyone that all the other members of the population, including the member that had the mutation, would all die just from natural causes. And as the generations move on, the number in the population that has that mutation trait for bioluminescence would increase because of genetic drift and natural selection until you reach the point where it's fixed in the population at 100%. And the population genetic mechanisms for fixation are pretty well described and documented.
Okay, thank you. What we're going to do now for these last super chats, I got to make sure I honor these. We'll have a power round, guys. So let's say less than a minute response each. And here we go, starting now. David McQuain, appreciate the support. Question for Grayson. What does genetically changing Cladomonas do? Or what does genetically changing Cladomonas to do different things prove? You can change any animal in a lab. That doesn't prove evolution. What are your thoughts on that, Grayson?
Yeah, so this is not a result of a change that's come about by genetic engineering of Chlamydomonas. This is a result of a mutation, or at least a result of them introducing predation pressures to the environment. And it's not like they went in there and physically changed the DNA and designed it to have this new multicellular feature. This was a result of a natural phenomenon when they changed the evolutionary pressures that the Chlamydomonas had to adapt to. So they changed the pressures, mutation happened, and the Chlamydomonas gained a multicellular function that is not observed in nature. So that would be the demonstration, is that you can have these kinds of mutations that have large-scale morphological impacts very quickly, such as multicellularity. It's not like we changed it in the lab. It's just an experiment done in the lab to prove that natural mutations could accomplish these changes.
Thank you, Grayson. Kent, anything you'd like to add quickly?
There's a long article answering that question, if I remember. It's been a while, either on Answers in Genesis or ICR.org. It's been too long since I looked at that. I'd have to go back and review, but I would steer people to the article. Try ICR, Institute for Creation Research.org, or Answers in Genesis up in Kentucky. Either one, I think, had biologists that had a long answer to that. Go ahead.
Thank you, I have read those articles, and I would be happy to debunk any of the material therein.
Okay, here we go. Here we go. So this one comes in from AI Rutabaga, and it's a question for both of you. So let's start with you, Grayson. Shouldn't there be more water erosion considering a worldwide flood happened?
I mean, it's not really a question for me. I don't really believe that a worldwide flood happened. So
shouldn't there be more water erosion considering a worldwide flood happened? So maybe this is a pro argument for the worldwide flood. Why shouldn't there be more of this? It's up. If you're happy with that answer, we'll just move on. I'm not sure. Maybe it could be worded differently. Kent, is anything you'd like to add to it?
Well, there are some gigantic erosion marks on this planet, like Grand Canyon and other canyons like that, Bryce Canyon. I think that's evidence of rapid erosion. Grand Canyon probably formed in a week, billions of gallons, not billions of years. We had a dam break here before we got the property. It made a huge erosion canyon in minutes. You can just type in dam break at Dinosaur Adventureland. Well, we did it. We purposely broke our one little dam to watch what would happen. It carved and washed away the whole dam in 7 minutes. So I think there's plenty of erosion marks on the planet, but erosion is directly proportional to the volume of water, the slope of the land, and the materials in the water. If it is able to pick up stuff like sand and gravel, it becomes liquid sandpaper. It'll carve through rock. So I don't think that's not a simple question to answer. I think there's too many variables involved in ask anybody who studies erosion science. It's a lot of variables in there.
Okay, thank you, Kent. And I think we will do one last question. Here we go. Here's your number one fan again, Kent. Creationist Crybaby never misses one of your debates. So CC's got a question for you. And it is, how did it happen that before humans arrived, Australia had none of the more advanced terrestrial placental mammals, such as dogs, cats, bears, and horses?
Wow, several obvious assumptions in the question. Do you think some animals are more advanced, like cats and dogs are more advanced than kangaroos? Put them in a cage together, watch what happens. I think the kangaroo would win every time. So I think there's a faulty premise in the question. I think that after the flood, the animals dispersed from the Noah's Ark. At the same time, the ice caps are melting back, which is going to slowly raise the ocean levels. I believe the ice age that we see, the obvious evidence for it, clear down to Kansas City, Missouri, there are terminal moraines and lateral moraines. I think the ice age took place at the same time as the flood, and I covered that on video number 6. As this ice melted back over the next 300, 400, 500 years, it would raise the ocean levels. By then, animals are trapped wherever they're going to get. If you look at a globe, Google Maps, how deep is the water between Australia and Vietnam? 30 or 40 feet from here to that wall. Now, it's hundreds of miles wide, but only 30 or 40 feet deep. If you lowered the oceans 100 feet, you could walk almost anywhere in the world, and they average 12,000 feet deep. Taking a 12,000-foot ocean, taking 100 feet off, is near nothing. But that's enough to connect all the continents. England and France are, 30 miles apart and only 100 feet deep, the English Channel. That's from here to the back wall. So I think the misunderstanding Creationist Crybaby has of many things, including the flood. The Bible predicted people would be willingly ignorant of the flood. So I think animals dispersing from the Noah's Ark would easily find habitats that they like to live in, like the same thing they do today. And the kangaroos liked Australia, and they're still there, except for the ones in the zoo. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Kent. Grayson, anything you'd like to add?
I don't really have anything specifically for Creationist Crybaby's question. It's a good question. But I do, on the topic of the flood, since people in the comments and Kent always bring up about how all these different cultures on Earth have flood myths, I just like to point out that the cultures that do not live in areas that are prone to flooding do not have flood myths. Right? This only happens when you live in a river valley or on the coast or in societies that live in areas where there's prone to flooding. We find flood myths, not global flood myths, mind you. Like the Chinese do not have a global flood myth, but they still have a flood myth that factors in where the first emperor tamed the floods by creating irrigation. That's not very biblical. That doesn't suggest a global flood. Then you have even in Australia, like in the interior of Australia, where there's no mass flooding that happens in those areas, you don't find like Aboriginal cultures having these massive flood myths. And then finally, in Central Asia, there's a great flood myth around like the Zoroastrian kind of like Persian Central Asian area where they don't have flooding regularly. What they do have is harsh winters. And actually what you have is Yima, who's the substitute for Noah, who is told by the Zoroastrian god that the god is going to cause a massive global winter all over the earth, and that he needs to go and dig a cave and bring all the animals 2 by 2 into his cave to protect them from the global winter. So it's the same basic formula as Noah's Ark, but no flood, no ark. It's a global winter in a cave. So this just depends on the geography of where these cultures are living.
Thank you, Grayson. Kent, you get the last word. Go ahead.
Well, I think to expect any story to be handed down for generations for 4,000 years and still remain the same is wishful thinking. But he kept throwing in the word myth. Grayson loves to mock the Bible at every opportunity. The flood myth, the flood myth, the flood myth. I would say it's the flood legend. And there are 250 discovered flood legends. They're all a book. I think we don't sell that one, do we, Randy? The flood legends in our bookstore. Okay, go to drdino.com. There are flood legends from all over the world. It's evolution. That's a myth. We don't ever see any animal produce a different kind of animal. You believe in a myth, Grayson, but that's okay.
Okay, thank you, Kent. And that is 30 plus minutes for the audience Q&A. So to the audience, thank you for so much. Great questions and input. We're going to wrap it up there, although we'll sneak this bonus one in. Bubblegum Gun has, I almost forgot this one. This one is just really quickly for you, Grayson, one of your best buds here. And he's coming at you. So he's saying, name one transitional between gray wolf and a Dalmatian. So I guess a domestic dog. Go ahead, Grayson.
Yeah, sure. So there are basal Eurasian hounds, which predate any breeds like Dalmatian, right? These are like from over 10,000 years ago. We would find hound fossils, dog fossils, right? They are not gray wolves. They are more derived than gray wolves, but yet they are not differentiated into breeds like the Dalmatian. So that would be an example of exactly what he's asking for, a basal Eurasian dog.
Thank you, Grayson. And this is the last question for tonight. Kent, is there anything you'd like to add to it?
I would like to see Grayson provide a transition between the gray wolf and a banana, because that's what he believes. He believes they're related.
I do not believe that, for the record. There's no transition between, like the transitions do not occur just between related species. Transitions occur from ancestral species to derived species. And bananas are not an ancestral species to humans. That's not what evolution claims. So if this is truly the end, I just want to use this time to plug the fact that I will be hosting an after show on my channel starting right after this. For anybody in the chat who feels like maybe their question wasn't addressed or they have some kind of point that they want to bring up, I welcome anyone to join the after show. I'll be there to discuss all these ideas and more. So for whoever wants to join, the link, I think Donny has pinned it in the chat. And as soon as this is over, I'll go over there and then I will pin the link to join in the chat for that video.
Okay, Grayson, thank you for that. And thank you for those final thoughts and final words. The link to your channel and after show is in the chat. Kent will give you your final words and final thoughts as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, I will not be hosting an after show. I got it 4 o'clock this morning. I'm going to bed. Good night.
Kent, you've earned it. You've earned it, brother. So with that, Kent, Grayson, thank you for 2 hours of your time. And thank you for a very engaging back and forth and debate to remember. So with that,
I'll see you next time at Dinosaur Adventureland, Kent.
Yeah, come on down. Come on down.
The next one will be live at Dal. I'll join you guys and I'll be the moderator. That'll be cool. So, okay, with that, Kent, you get yourself some sleep. Grayson, you head on over to your after show. And to the audience, we'll see you in a couple of minutes here.
But do we have evidence that large-scale changes occur? Yeah, we have the fossil record, and it really is a record, and it's so much so that he can't even pretend to refute it. He just has to pretend it's not really evidence.
For anybody in this room who calls yourself a Christian, if you think you have scientific evidence to indicate you're God, bring it. You ain't got it. I win.
Dead.
How dare you create a world in which there is such misery that is not our fault? It's not right. Why should I respect a capricious, mean-minded, stupid God who creates a world which is so full of injustice and pain?
All we've ever seen in the history of humanity is variations happen with limits. But you really think an amoeba turned into a shark and a whale and everything? There's no evidence of a single-celled creature ever producing even a two-celled creature, let alone an elephant or a whale or a human. But they put them on, draw lines on paper. The evolution theory clearly teaches the Earth began as a hot ball of rock. As it cooled down, it began to rain, and it rained on the rocks for millions of years and turned them into soup, and the soup came alive. Wade, simple question. Do you believe you are related to a snail? Just a yes or no.
Yeah.
One more thing. Next time we have a debate, instead of a possum hat, Wade, I got the perfect hat for you to wear. Right here.
Oh, hold on.
With your SpongeBob imagination. Just imagine, you're related to a possum.
I don't have any tinfoil, but I'm sure you've got some tinfoil. You can make a hat.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Everyone's
stuff.
in on it, right?
Okay, there we go. That is the Evolution Debate Challenge trailer, the official trailer. Maybe one day it'll be turned into its own Netflix series. So Laura Anderson, good to see you, sister. I appreciate that. Tom Walden, Redefine Living, thank you so much. Kevin's Biblical Discussions, God bless you, brother. So there we go, another one in the books. And for anybody new to this channel, we are very close to wrapping up what I would say is an epic year. It is going to be a tough year to top, although I said that at the beginning of this year when it came to 2021, because we had so many awesome debates last year as well. This year was epic for many reasons, but one of the reasons has to do with the Evolution Debate Challenge series. So we've done over 50 of them, and just this year we've had so many trilogies. Just a couple that come to mind. We had the Wade the Wizard quadrilogy, actually I think it would be called. James W. Mark Reed versus Kent debate trilogy, Ken Rock debate trilogy, Snake was right, 2 debate trilogies for 6 debates, Jackson Rowe. Regardless, tons of fun, tons of debates. I saw a question, I think it was from Ashley Myers. And so, yes, I've been mixing it up. So doing a separate ancestry series. So I personally debated, actually, if you enjoyed this debate and you want to see more debates, let's say with Grayson, I debated him specifically on ancestry and genetics. Went for about 3.5 hours. Probably one of the longest debates I've personally done, formal that is. We've had open mics for 6, 7, 8 hours, but I highly recommend that one. I've also started a new series, The Case for Separate Ancestry. I released episode 1 last week, and it's over an hour and a half, and I go in depth into a lot of the arguments that I make in this book. So anybody who's interested in getting a book, this one's 300 pages. It's a book that basically has all of your best arguments for separate ancestry, mitochondrial Eve, Y chromosome Noah. It goes into junk DNA, endogenous retroviruses. It goes into Neanderthals, the hominid fossil record. And so this is as up to date as you're going to find on all of the, especially the genetics related arguments. So I wrote this one, and the series that I'm doing is kind of based on this book, although I've got some novel arguments as well in the new series. So do check that out. I'm nearly done episode 2 of that series. Episode 2 is going to focus on genetic entropy. And so definitely you don't want to miss episode 2. It is going to be comprehensive. I am going to make sure to address all of the top objections and criticisms from the critics on genetic entropy. This book also has an entire section on genetic entropy. So I've been mixing it up. I've also released a book on end times theology. This is End Times Revealed. This one's over 311 pages as well. And it's very comprehensive, gets into all of your different eschatological models, including your different views on the millennium, including preterism, both partial and full. So I do highly recommend that. And I've been doing a series. So my video series on that topic is now over 20 videos. And I just started adding ones that are going to be titled End Times Moments. So they'll be slightly shorter than, let's say, the 2-hour ones. Although the one I put out last night still went for an hour. It's a comprehensive topic. And I've engaged people of so many differing views that once I start talking about a specific point, I'm basically addicted to leaving no stone unturned on each point. So please do check that out. You can find the book on our website, as well as in the description box, and also the Endogenous Retrovirus Handbook. As everybody knows who has followed this series this year, one of the main lines of evidence revolution that is constantly advanced by the evolution side, always excellent debates. I love these. But one of them is endogenous retroviruses. So I wrote an entire handbook on it with the most up-to-date information possible on that issue. So please check that out as well. This book was not written by myself or this ministry, but I do want to recommend it, please. It is the most up-to-date book that you're going to find on the hominid fossil record. It's got a whole section on dating methods. It's got a whole section on the genetic related arguments for evolution, essentially addressing them. So this is by Christopher Roop, a great brother in the Lord of mine, and Dr. John Sanford. So this one's excellent. Contested Bones. Please, I highly recommend this one. And again, it wasn't written by me or anything, but I just want to say to anybody who's invested in the ancestry debate, creation versus evolution, that is a must-have book on the creation evolution debate topic controversy. So Greenie, SFT on Patreon. Yes, you can find me on Patreon. You can support us, this ministry, help us continue going full-time for as little as $1 a month. I just put out a 20-page article on eschatology. You can find it on Patreon. Actually, it's to the public, so you don't even have to be a patron. I made that one available to everybody, and you can also download a free PDF of it. So it's a pretty extensive article. It's about 20 pages. If you want an extremely comprehensive reading of eschatology, I recommend the book itself. Cheryl, I appreciate that, sister. And again, anybody new to this channel, if you go to the debates hosted by Standing For Truth playlist, we've now done easily over 260, I believe, at this point. And the debates continue. So tomorrow we're going to have an interesting debate. It's going to be our team geologist, Professor David McQueen, and Ryan Adler. So this one's going to be a bit earlier. This is going to be at 5:30 in the afternoon EST. So David McQueen versus Ryan Adler on Noah's Ark. Is Noah's Ark feasible? So again, that's at 5:30. Make sure you're here for that. It's going to be an awesome debate. Always an interesting topic when we're debating specifically Noah's Ark, the feasibility of Noah's Ark. So please make sure you're here for that. And in the last 7 days, we've actually done, I think, 3 debates in the Evolution Debate Challenge series. So we had Kent and Kennedy about a week ago, 7 days ago. Then Kent and Evan 2 days ago. And now tonight, Grayson and Kent. And for Grayson and Kent, I always appreciate Grayson coming here and debating, because I would say he's one of the better interlocutors on the evolution side. So he always makes for a very engaging debate where the various scientific points are discussed in depth. Okay, so this one's coming up. Jamie and Grayson, they've been going at it. They've been going at it hard. And so we're putting them into the octagon. And this one, I can guarantee you, will be a fun debate. It'll be a debate to remember. Ashley Myers, let me get this in real quick. When will you do your next live stream where audience can ask questions for end times? I may do my next one live so I can take audience questions, or I may try and fit one in that's just specifically a Q&A. And so, although I do take questions, I love getting questions specifically on Facebook, which I get a lot over my personal Facebook account because I can send basically an audio response and it saves me from the carpal tunnel. But I do my best to respond through email as well. But I will start incorporating more live Q&As on the eschatology topic. Now, I am in talks with somebody named Chris Lucas. He's here frequently on the channel. Great guy, great brother in Christ. He's a historicist. And so him and we're going to be having an informal debate. I'm not sure. I got to fit it in somewhere. We've got shows almost every single day. So that one, I'll probably fit it in impromptu at some point, kind of like I did last week. I had an impromptu debate with somebody named Jamie Russell, who holds to Seventh-day Adventist eschatology. And so we had a very cordial debate, a lot of fun, went basically 3 hours. And so that was impromptu. And so me and Chris Lucas will be having one hopefully sooner rather than later. I would say sometime in the next week. And I'll try and give people a heads up for that one since it will be live. And then we can have some audience Q&A there as well. And so 2023, I've got a lot of big ideas, big plans, and I'm going to try and fit in as much content, live content as possible. Even when I put out articles, I still want to do video forms of them as well. I know in 2022, 2023, people love the interactive format and content. So videos, live streams, things like that, which is completely understandable, especially on the go, right? When you're working and you have a job where you can kind of listen to various streams as you're going, it is helpful. Okay, so we got some epic debates coming up in January. I'll just go over a couple here and then I'm going to wrap it up. So Paul Price, I love Paul. He puts out some great material. He's written a ton for CMI, creation.com. I've had him on over, I think about 2 years ago now. And he debated Dr. Ron Garrett specifically on genetic entropy. That was an awesome debate. So this is coming up. Is there evidence for the existence of God? We've also got first week of January. We've got Nick Sayers, Turretin fan. Is the King James Bible totally free from all errors? 2 seasoned debaters, both very knowledgeable, sophisticated, and professional. So this is going to be epic. To me, this one's a main event. I love the topic of eschatology. I had Pastor Matt First here a month ago for one of my favorite debates. I mean, it went for 3.5 hours. It was titled, Who is True Israel? So if you have not yet seen that one, please do check it out. It was Matt First versus David Preston. And that was an excellent debate, very comprehensive and almost the first of its kind. It's a controversial topic, but if you search it on YouTube, you don't find much in terms of debates on it. The Israel topic, that is. And so I'd highly recommend everybody check it out. This one's going to be, I believe it's the 2nd, January 2nd. So this is going to be huge. At least to me, especially. I love the eschatology topic. So the great rapture debate, 2 pastors. Pastor Matt First has written a book on the topic. Pastor Daniel Eldridge has written a book on the topic. And so they're coming into the octagon. They're going to duke it out, as one could say. Is the pre-tribulation rapture biblical? Matt First would say no. Daniel Eldridge would say yes. And so that is going to be great. Ashley Myers, appreciate the comments. Sister, good to have you as always. Your channel is my favorite channel. I appreciate that. Praise the Lord. And I don't watch TV, so I watch SFT. One day we'll try and get an app, SFT TV, and then you can have just 24/7 content. I'm just looking at the chat real quick. make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay. Great to have such an awesome audience today. You know, I'm sure everybody says it, but I think it's actually true with us. We have the best audience out there. And so thank you so much, everybody, for that. Looking forward to this one. This is going to be an informal discussion in January. So Will Kinney, Dr. Stephen Boyce, both of these gentlemen, both of these brothers here have done a ton of study on this topic. So probably nobody better to get into the ring and discuss the King James only topic. So Will Kinney and Stephen Boyce. We've also got some soteriology debates coming up. One in February, the first week, actually. I don't have the thumbnail here right now, but it is up on the channel. Charles Jennings and Travis Thomas, both very knowledgeable on the soteriology topic. And so they're going to be debating free grace versus lordship. We've also got this one, Dan Chapa, Joshua Gibbs. Love both of these brothers. They've both been here before. They're both seasoned debaters, both very knowledgeable as well. We're going to be having a ton of scholarly professional debates on all sorts of topics for 2023. So I'm doing my best to basically put on the best debates and really top 2022. So anybody that's interested in debates on any topic, please reach me through email or Facebook. I got 2 emails you can reach me on, Standing For Truth Ministries @gmail.com. That's the email that I'm slowly shifting towards using basically full time for scheduling in 2023. So try and reach me there. And whatever topics interest you, you'd like, even if you're a new debater, just give me a list of what they are. And then that'll help me be able to set people up. Appreciate it. Thank you for the passion and efforts and energy. Yes. Thank God for coffee. Coffee keeps me going. So C Science says, stay strong and God bless. God blesses you, you as well. Doki Doki Bible Club. God bless, brother. Hope you've had a couple good coffees today and enjoying your day. Merry late Christmas, everybody. And also early Happy New Year's. Laura Anderson, appreciate it. Yes, we love the scholarly professional debates. I really enjoyed tonight's debate in terms of the format. We've done so many on evolution that I really like this idea now is the second we get started, just basically jump right into a free-flowing discussion, keep it cordial, keep it as equally timed as possible, focusing on one topic at a time. So I'm going to try and incorporate more debates like this for 2023. So real quick, I'm going to give these couple events a shout out, then I'm wrapping it up. So Dinosaurs, Man, Creation, and the Flood. Dr. Dan Biddle, huge blessing. Highly recommend his ministry, Genesis Apologetics. Please do check it out. You can find their YouTube channel. They've got well over 100,000 subscribers. They put out some great videos. You can check out Dr. Dan Biddle's website. And so he's been here a couple times before. He was here for a show specifically with me and Matt on human evolution and also the flood. And so he'll be here in January on Dinosaurs, Man, Creation, and the Flood. I'm doing my best to mix in the lectures, the presentations, the debates, the discussions, just kind of giving you a little bit of everything, guys. We've also got Dr. Jerry Bergman. He's going to be back here for a presentation in January. If I'm not mistaken, it is up on the channel, so feel free to check it out. I believe it's titled "The Universe Was Made Just for You." And so that'll be live, and therefore we will have some live Q&A. I'm pumped for this one. Paul Price and I, the end of January, we're going to be debunking liberal scholarship on Behemoth. So debating people like Michael Heiser, John Walton, the uninspiring compromiser, also known as Inspiring Philosophy, Sentinel Apologetics. So we're going to be debunking liberal scholarship. And Paul Price has actually released a really solid article on creation.com. He wrote it, released it, and I read through it. I thought it was excellent. And so Paul and I, we're going to do a show specifically focusing on refuting liberal scholarship. And so I think that's pretty much it. We've got an awesome Catholic debate coming up as well. Actually, no, Greek Orthodox. So it's going to be Pastor Chuck and Steve Christie from the Born Again RN YouTube channel. And so they are going to be stepping into the debate octagon, and they are going to be engaging. The topic is prayer to Mary and the saints worship. And so that's at the end of January. Guys, debates on all sorts of topics. Just make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you are hitting that like button. Donny isn't afraid of winter. Blue t-shirt hero. Yeah, if you go and, I used to get all dressed to the max for these debates. People probably remember. And they thought, you know what? I'm going to get an SFT official shirt, and then it's going to be so easy in terms of picking what to wear for each debate. So I've got about 20 of these. You open up my closet, I got about a lineup of 20 of them. No, I'm just kidding about the 20, but I think that's it. So everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for all the awesome questions, super chats, and support. And with that, Standing for Truth is out. God bless all.